Well, it looked on Sunday like it was going to be the end of the career for Molly Davis after she was injured against Ohio State. Not the case. We'll talk about her chances of coming back. Iowa looking for a number one seed. The men's team on the bubble. We got football. We got basketball. We got baseball. We got wrestling. We have it all today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button while you're here. It helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, Sunday, the win against Ohio State in a rousing environment at Carver Hawkeye Arena. There were so many feel-good stories. Obviously, Caitlin Clark playing her final regular season game in a Hawkeye uniform before the NCAA Tournament, the Big Ten Tournament on tap, Senior Day festivities, but it was in a way all overshadowed by the injury to Molly Davis. And Molly Davis went down after a steal, another hustle play out of Molly D, as she's been dubbed by Gus Johnson, and just doing the things that you want. And listening after the game, seeing her in the wheelchair, and just hearing her talk about being a player short of stature. Look, I was a 5'7" two guard in the North Iowa Conference a million years ago. I feel for the short people, but we saw her a year ago transfer in from Central Michigan. She had a small role on the team, but she was an impact player. She wasn't anybody that, after looking at her statistics the year before and playing in the MAC, that was a huge part of the team on the floor. And yes, she kept working on her game and kept building herself up to be not just a Big Ten player, but a starting Big Ten player, a starting player in a top 5 team in the country, and doing it with her short stature. She's easy to root for. And now to see that way that went down and what looked at the time to be a season ender. Well, that's not the case. And Lisa Bluder talked about this both in her press conference on Tuesday and on Monday night on the Hawk Talk radio show. And she said it was a kneecap injury. So we talked about this and speculated a little bit on the show earlier this week, every day, as you remember, because it was just so odd. You see that kind of non-contact injury. Yes, I know there was a little bump in the back. Look, you slow down the tape and it looks terrible. That's not the play. Look, contact's going to happen in a game. There was not contact that led to that kind of injury. She played it, knee went wrong, and it was a dislocated kneecap or something along those lines. Now, Coach Bluder has not said officially what the injury is. She did mention a kneecap, though, and it leads you to look at some of these past injuries. I think the most prominent one that is in the same vein would happen to Patrick Mahomes when he was trying to do the quarterback sneak. They don't do quarterback sneaks anymore with Kansas City, and he was out for a few weeks. So there's 26 days between last Sunday's game against Ohio State and what could be the first Sweet 16 game, or even if they play a day later, which would be on Saturday. So it's Friday through Monday for the Sweet 16 Elite 8 games. And if you push it back, look, she's not going to play this week in the Big Ten tournament. And as Iowa waits the winner of Penn State and Wisconsin, likely Indiana then in the next round, and then finish up if Ohio State comes out of the top side of the bracket, we're not going to see Molly Davis play in that. But then, because the Big Ten tournament is early, before we get to Selection Sunday, it is going to be more, obviously, time for her to heal, for her to go out there. And it goes from her looking like it was a torn ACL. I think that's where a lot of people's minds went, myself included. But then you saw the way that she was carried off the floor. That's odd. Normally with an ACL injury, you can put pressure on it. You can still walk on it. Then you're on crutches right afterwards. They had the big leg wrap on her. They had the wheelchair that was out there. She wasn't on crutches. And it led to the speculation. And though I went to school for a long time, I'm not a doctor, not even close to it. It was just so different than what we normally saw. That the good news comes out there. We know how impactful she can be. And you go back to some of their victories. The first win against Indiana this year. I mean, she was absolutely monstrous in that game. Her ability off the bounce, her ability to run the point, have Caitlin then play the two guard position and do things and get her involved in different ways than just as a facilitator. That's a huge help. And you really look at the depth of this team. there aren't a bunch of strong ball handlers that are part of that group. I anticipate you're going to see Kate Martin kind of filling that role that Davis did at times, running the point with Clayton playing the two guard position, kind of go that route from time to time when they go there. The good news is, that our season's not over, or at least there's an opportunity that it's not over. I mean, that's a great part of it. We'll see how rehab goes, and we'll see what Iowa does too. I think we still have to remind ourselves that there are no sure things. A couple of years ago, we thought this team was destined for a date with Iowa State in the Sweet 16. They get beat by Creighton in the round of 32. Last season, this will be easy right in the Sweet 16. Wasn't the case. It was a battle to get by Georgia in the round of 32. Hell, you're supposed to play Stanford in the Elite Eight if you play out to seeding. They get beat in the round of 32 by Ole Miss. By the way, who's one of the teams, I believe in ESPN and Charlie Crean's bracketology, who does he have Iowa facing off against if both teams win in the first round? That's right, Ole Miss. So there are no sure things even to get to a Sweet 16. I think we have to remind ourselves about that from time to time. This team is clicking. They're playing well. We see the improvements of Gabby Marshall getting that shot back. Feuerbach has been a revelation over the last couple of games. We know McCabe can knock down shots. The play of Hannah Stolke and just how good she was against that talented front line of Ohio State, and when she's right and everything's clicking, and Caitlin's throwing those throw-ahead passes, and she's rim running and beating everybody down the floor with her great speed and athleticism, how good she can be. Kate Martin, the glue of the team, all these different things. Roles are going to be different. This team is going to look a little bit different, but huge news there. Molly Davis with the potential of coming back and helping this team. That is at least a chance to breathe because she is absolutely an important part. And if I was going to make another run, everybody is going to have to pull their weight. Ultimately, it comes down to Caitlin Clark. We know that. That's how this team is built. That's how they go. As she goes, Iowa goes. And we've seen that throughout the course of her career, her 4 years. Also today, Caitlin Clark has been named the Big Ten Player of the Year. Shocker, I know, for the third straight time. She is the Big Ten Player of the Year. Likely the National Player of the Year is going to be following. You can't see any other direction that this thing is going to go, but it's about ramping up now and playing your best basketball. Great news also is what Iowa has done and how good Iowa is at this time of year. And Lisa Bluder has done such a great job of pushing the right buttons, getting everybody clicking at this time, just elevating their game throughout the course of the season, and then peaking at the end of the year. You go back to even before Caitlin was here and the run to the Elite Eight, first time we'd seen that since the 1990s. And we saw, obviously, Megan Gustafson and how good she was. Iowa in the Big Ten tournament over the last 5 years is 12-2. 12-2 with 3 championships over the last 5 years. That shows you how good they play in this event. It's going to be a decided Hawkeye fan base up there in Minneapolis. You're going to see upwards of 85% of the fans in the building. It's going to be Hawkeye fans and a lot of people there to watch Caitlin Clark and a lot of people there to watch this team. This is going to be a home court advantage for the Hawkeyes. They will have the same in the first and second rounds of the NCAA tournament. Now, when we get to the Sweet 16 and an Elite 8, if they advance that far, it'll be either in Albany or Portland. A little bit more difficult, but go back to a year ago and the way that the fan base traveled out to Seattle and were able to do some huge things in terms of just attendance there. And it was the growth that we saw of women's basketball and the TV numbers. Speaking of TV numbers, the numbers are in from the Ohio State game, and they are monstrous. The 6th most watched basketball game of the whole season. No, not women's basketball game, basketball game. There was a Thanksgiving game, Michigan State, Arizona, I believe. Men's basketball. Well, I had a lead in from the NFL. That helps on Big Fox. You have some Christmas Day games, a couple of others, NBA games, but it is higher than any other men's basketball game. Duke, Carolina earlier this year did not have as many viewers as Iowa women against Ohio State on Sunday. Just absolutely monstrous. 3.34 million people tuned in to watch Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes get the win against the second-ranked Buckeyes. It's incredible. There's at times you just run out of things to say, but they're so much fun to watch. They're so entertaining, and you get to watch Caitlin Clark. We're in good shape. We got a lot more going on, though, in the world of the Hawkeyes. We're going to talk about a great night on the bubble for Iowa tonight. A lot of things going the way of the Hawkeyes here this evening into Tuesday night, and looking forward. Iowa, it's not just a vacuum about what they do. It's what's happening across the country, and it was a pretty good one. We got Iowa baseball to talk about after another tough weekend against Ole Miss. They bounce back, get a midweek game. The seeds are out for the Big Ten wrestling tournament, and I got a rant on football. Yeah, we got a busy one. We continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets for your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love the ability to find your tickets, buy them, in any kind of event in your area, and the views from all seats in the venue. See exactly where you're going to be, what that's going to look like when you get inside the building. Doesn't matter if you're talking about Kinnick Stadium or Carver Hawkeye Arena. Maybe you're taking a road trip. Maybe it is Albany or Seattle and getting to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. See the view from your seat before you buy and know exactly what you're going to expect when you arrive. Game Time also has deals on tickets right up until the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last minute tickets. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Trent Condon back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Let's get into the men's basketball team, and the resume is what it is at this point in time. Not a whole lot of changes. We've talked about the potential of the Minnesota road victory turning into a quad one victory. One other aspect you do also, I think, have to realize is not all of these quad one victories are obviously measured the same. A road win against Minnesota is a whole lot different than beating Purdue at home. I mean, it goes without saying. And though they're both quad one victories, and they both would be quad one victories, one, I think, rates a little bit higher. There's been a lot of talk by bracketologists about quad 1A victories. And those are, instead of just quad one victories, wins against NCAA tournament teams or teams that are expected to be NCAA tournament teams. Well, as Iowa's won 4 of their last 5, they have road victories against Michigan State, against Northwestern, the home win against Wisconsin. Those are those quad 1A victories, I think, that could go even further for this team. If Iowa goes out, beats Illinois over the weekend, wins their first Big Ten tournament game, I think they're in great shape. I think at minimum, if that plays out in that fashion, that they're going to be going to Dayton and maybe even a little bit higher than that. And the reason for it is not just because the resume looks good, you're adding another quad one victory, you're doing it against an Illinois team that's incredibly talented, and now you add that one to your resume, but it's also what's happening across the country. As I'm flipping on 612 on DirecTV tonight, watching the ACC network, watching Wake Forest, excuse me, against Georgia Tech, as that one comes down to the wire in that one. And it was a hideous shot, but Georgia Tech got it done. Well, Wake Forest is one of those bubble teams, and they fall by the wayside in that one. Boise State goes down, loses at home to Steve Alford. Steve Alford helping us out. Oh, yeah, exactly. K-State gets blown out by Kansas. No surprise there, but Kansas State, I think, further down the list than Iowa. Still, it's not in a vacuum. It's about what else is happening across the country. Cincinnati goes down. There's another team that at least was on the fringes of the bubble. There's a whole lot going the way of the Hawkeyes, and these bubble teams that continue to fall by the wayside, that continue to just fall further and further back. Syracuse, another team that felt like they were inching their way up. I think they'd won 8 of their last 10, something like that. They get blown out by Clemson here this evening. There are just a lot of these games that continue to go Iowa's way, and as these teams continue to falter or add some more warts to the resume, that's only going to help Iowa get into the NCAA tournament. If this happens, if Iowa gets to the NCAA tournament, I don't think there's any doubt this is one of Brand's best coaching jobs, and maybe his best ever. Now, I get the caveat that everybody wants to throw in there with Fran McCaffrey. It's the second weekend. I pose this to you because I hear that a ton. I think people overlook the difficult nature of the Iowa basketball job, how he has brought it back to really the level that Dr. Tom Davis had it in. And people just want to see that success. Yes, Dr. Tom made a Sweet 16 in his final year. He also had a decade in between taking over a program in a lot better shape than certainly what Fran walked into and didn't get there. And I'm left with this. If Fran McCaffrey would have won that overtime game 5 years back against Tennessee, down 18, come roaring back. J-Bo's knocking down shots. They force overtime. Nicholas Bear was on that team. They get to OT. If Iowa would have won that game into the Sweet 16 and then lost the next game, would people still be fine with things? No, they wouldn't. I think it's silly. It's a convenient excuse for people that don't like Fran, don't like the style, don't like the lack of defense, don't whatever your issue is with Fran McCaffrey. I think it's just something easy to point to. Yes, would the next coach maybe be able to do that? Possibly. But the likelihood that Iowa's next coach is going to have the sustainability and the success that Fran McCaffrey has, I don't think is realistic. Could it happen? Absolutely. You can catch lightning in a bottle. You can make that happen and you can elevate the program. But the likelihood is you are what you are. And there's no guarantee that the next coach is going to get you to a Sweet 16. Hell, would you rather be Oregon State? Oregon State made a run to the Elite Eight, 4 years ago now? They made one NCAA tournament in the last 2 decades, but they made a run. They got it to the second weekend, right? Because apparently for a lot of people, that's all that they care about. And it's so short-sighted. He took this group that multiple times this year we called dead. Everybody called them. Even the most ardent Hawkeye fan couldn't see this team pulling themselves out of the muck. And yet here they are. Now there's still work to do. And there's still a real possibility that this team doesn't make the NCAA tournament. You lose to Illinois, you get bounced in the first or second game at the Big Ten tournament. I don't think it's going to be enough to get a bid, even to Dayton, and to get in to the round of 68. That's a real possibility. But to take this group, to see the way that they have elevated behind Josh Dix, what Tony Perkins has turned into now as a point guard, really changing their style of offense. Well, Iowa was still good offensively this year, but not good for their standards. Not what we're used to. You go back just over a month ago, they were 21st in the country in offensive efficiency. They're up to 10th. That is a huge leap that deep into the season. And a reason for that has been Josh Dix. Instead of going through Ben Krikke a lot with the offense, it's been more with the guards and doing things on their hand. The pull-up jumpers, the long twos, something that are not great basketball shots, and certainly with what teams do defensively, that's what drop coverage is. I mean, they're either going to force you off the three-point line and keep you away from the rim. That's what the defense that most everybody in the country now plays, that's what you're trying to do. The problem for them is that's where I was at our best. Sanford, Dix, Perkins, Krikke is good on those long jumpers. Those long twos, it's something that Iowa is one of the few teams in the country that actually thrive in that kind of situation. And it's worked out well. Keep it going. We're going to talk a little bit more later in the week about the matchup against Illinois. We saw that game. Iowa had plenty of opportunities. I think they let one slip away when you look back. The starters got benched early in the second half of that game by Underwood. He put all the Illini down there. Shannon and company all went to the bench, and Iowa wasn't able to take advantage, had a 7-point lead inside of 10 minutes, and very quickly it dissipated. It's a possible winnable game. And the way that they're playing, Carver hopefully is going to be fired up once again. We're going to see a great crowd. It's sold out, and hopefully there's not a bunch of orange in there. Keep those pumpkins outside of the building. We'll talk more about Iowa, Illinois. We got plenty more here on Locked On Hawkeyes. I want to talk a little baseball with you. Bounce back win against St. Thomas. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean a whole lot for Iowa baseball, but potentially a sign of things to come. They have a huge opportunity in front of them, but they have to start playing some really good baseball here over the next week. We'll get into that. We'll also talk a little Iowa football as it pertains to the college football playoff. There's something out there that frustrates me. Plus wrestling, the seeds are out, and do the Hawkeye wrestlers get screwed? We'll talk about that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. All right, we got a little potpourri here to finish up. We're going to hit a little bit of everything. We're going to bounce around a little bit. I do want to start first with the seeds coming out for the wrestling team and what they have coming up when you look forward to what's around the corner for them. So, all right. We know Penn State is a behemoth, right? I mean, Penn State, the gap between them and everybody else in collegiate wrestling, it's significant. It's frustrating, but it is the reality. And when you look at the seeding process, Real Woods gets a 3 seed. All right. Not real good, right? Not what you want from a guy that came in as the number 1 guy at 141. Drake Ayala is the top seeded wrestler at 125. He is the number 2 seed and certainly hope for a big performance out of him coming up this season. Caleb Ratchey gets the number 3 seed at 149. Good to see that. Franek, number 4. Caliendo gets number 3. Same for Patrick Kennedy. And Glazer at number 3. The ones, though, that are probably the most difficult to swallow, and I think the biggest one, is at 133. And Brody Teske. So Teske, it's been in and out. Obviously want to have him right. And in his final go-around in a Hawkeye singlet. And the seeding's not a huge issue on the surface. All right, you got to win some matches, but when you are seated that low, well, first of all, you're going to be taking on a hammer in your first match. For Teske, it's going to be up against the number 3 seed. And if you lose that match, the amount of work that you have to do just to qualify for the NCAAs is going to be incredibly difficult. I don't think there's any doubt that Brody Teske should not be a 14 seed. More than likely something probably in that 10 seed range. I think would have been more fair for the accomplishments that he's had this season, coupled with what he's been even though during an injury-plagued career, starting with his days back at Penn State. But that one, I think, was definitely frustrating seeing him down at that one. And then at 184, Aiden Rangens gets the 13. Again, it's going to be so difficult coming back. You're going to have to win 3 matches to feel really good about your chances on the backside of the bracket if you lose in the opening round of the Big Ten tournament. Brands was playing a little coy with what they're going to do with Keeter and Arnold. I think this is the right decision as they hand in their lineup to have those guys redshirt. You're not going to track down Penn State this year. It can't happen. It just is impossible to beat them this season. And it sucks. And it's not the wrestler mentality, and I get all that, but it's reality. You're not beating Penn State this year. Play for the future. Play for the next 4 years and see if there's going to be a way that you can use NIL money, bring in some transfers, build this roster up very quickly, have the young guys come in, and you can compete again with Penn State. Because what they've continued to build and put out on the mat every single year, it is tough. And that gap is big, but it's not happening this season. One other note, I got to bring up the college football playoff and my frustration with what's happening here. So as we know, the next 2 years is going to have the 12-team college football playoff. And we've talked about Iowa's opportunity this season with the schedule, even with the Big Ten West going away, that there's a real chance that Iowa can be in a 12-team playoff. They really can get there. They can play for another Big Ten championship and hopefully with a competent offense actually have an opportunity in that game, something that hasn't been the case over the last couple of years. The defense has a chance to be elite again. The offense can't go anywhere but up. There's going to be some excitement of getting some new looks and new style, obviously, out there with Tim Lester, what he wants to do with the offense, which should be at minimum a veteran offensive line, and you hope a pretty good one, good running game, a veteran quarterback in McNamara. On and on and on. We've talked about this, but my problem is a 12-team playoff makes sense. Top 4 teams get buys. All right, away we go. The run to 14 and the push to get to a 14-team playoff and leading to only 2 teams getting buys. And the SEC and the Big Ten together trying to flex their muscle and say, we're the only ones that can get buys. That aside, whatever. Look, the likelihood that I was going to finish first or second in the country is incredibly low. Now, could Iowa win a Big Ten title and get one of those buys? It'd be great, but it's the money grab. And it's a money grab that's not that much money. In the grand scheme of things, you're talking about ESPN values 2 more opening round playoff games, which would be the number 3 seed taking on the number 14 seed and the 4 seed going up against the 13. 3 versus 14, 4 versus 13. That's what you'd have. And ESPN values it at like $25 million. Well, $25 million. Come on, Condon. That's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money when you are divvying it up between all the power conference schools, along with the group of 5 gets a cut, along with Notre Dame getting a cut. It's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, and you're screwing this thing up before you've even seen what a 12-team playoff does. It's one thing for a money grab for money grab's sake, right? And we've seen plenty of those. That's not what this is. It doesn't make sense. It's not good for the sport. I think they're getting this wrong. And I haven't heard anybody anywhere that's excited about a 14-team playoff compared to what we're going to have with a 12-teamer. You get to 16, everybody's got to play 4 games, win 4 games to win a national championship. Fine. But 14 for 14's sake, that's just dumb. Absolutely dumb. As we get closer to spring football, we're going to be talking a whole lot more Hawkeye football here on Locked On Hawkeyes. And finally, the Iowa baseball team gets a win 9-3 against St. Thomas on Tuesday afternoon into the evening. Important to get that win. Iowa's wiggle room is in trouble. Losing the series to Ole Miss, what looks to be certainly a rebuilding Ole Miss team. The bullpen issues that have continued to crop up for them have been incredibly frustrating. And what we've seen, you got to get it done now. You go down to Jacksonville State. Not a real good team. I mean, they're okay, but they're not great. You have to at minimum win this series. You'd love to be able to take this one. The midweek game that they have coming up against Georgia elevates even more. Georgia has not played the most difficult schedule, but it's a good SEC team. A team that at minimum is going to be fighting to be an NCAA tournament team. Those are the kind of wins that you get because in the Big Ten, in baseball, it's just not the same kind of quality. And even if you rip off an incredible season, you have to show that you did something at minimum even to get a number 2 seed out of the 4-team region and not having to play in one of the top teams right away. And that's what Iowa needs to work to do. I still can get there. The bullpen, I am shocked it's been this bad. You looked at all the names that they brought in, some of the arms that they brought in with a lot of talent, and you thought this thing was going to be cruising. We know the rotation's elite, and it's still been great. Brody Brecht's been excellent. Morgan's been okay. Obermüller's been okay. You know you're in good shape there. The bats haven't quite come alive as you'd hope maybe at this point in the season. Need to see more there. Offense is going to have to help out. They're going to have to mash some games. Until they can figure out those dependable guys in the bullpen, that's going to be the case. But it has to start to happen now, or you're going to dig yourself too deep of a hole. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're here for you each and every day. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you being with us each and every day. Also want to let you know what we have going on the Locked On Network. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Coming up tomorrow, old friend Biz stops back in. We'll talk with Biz, everything going on and his perspective. He was in Carver Hawkeye for the game on Sunday. We'll get his look back at that one and a look forward as Molly Davis potentially comes back to the team, working her way back from injury. A road trip up to Minneapolis. We'll get ready for the first round game for the Iowa women and set the scene for what they have coming up this weekend up at the Target Center. And then, of course, the monster matchup for Iowa on the men's side as they take on Illinois, plus Big Ten wrestling, plus baseball. Whew, it's a busy time. Spring football right around the corner. It's always great to be a Hawkeye, and it's great to be with you each and every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.